Across the Flow FM network, a Flow News 24 update.
We're talking to Wayne Phillips, the Flow Man now. He's been nice enough to join us and he's got plenty to talk to us about grain growers. And the Grain Growers Policy Survey has identified a range of challenges. So, Wayne, from the morning show here to discuss them with me. How are you, Wayne?
Excellent, thanks, Dan. Looking forward to looking at this really important report that's just been released.
Absolutely, and we'll get straight into it. So what exactly was the survey and what did it comprise of?
Well, Grain Growers is a limited organisation that actually represents a whole range of grain growers right across Australia. So they took a survey of 626 farmers around Australia. 97% of those farmers said that when they participated, they flagged in the survey that farm inputs were the key issue. But interestingly enough, it wasn't just inputs that they mentioned, like, say, diesel or maybe sprays for their chemical. They actually mention the word farm machinery availability, equipment repairs and parts access as the crucial issues that 97% of those 626 farmers identified. I think that's a telling statistic and one that needs a bit more explanation.
All right, were there any other key issues that farmers identified in the survey, or does that pretty much cover the main ones?
No, they actually were very extensive. In fact, they rated at percentage level other challenges that they're facing. Trade and market access was one, 43% in that particular portfolio, but as opposed to, say, 97%, only half the number of responders really felt that was as important as parts and farm machinery access. And I think that comes out of the COVID-19 situation where we've had a lot of the, if you like, freight routes, overseas, headers, tractors, parts being not accessible for second-hand market. I've heard some of our second-hand farm machinery dealers saying to their people, we just can't get your parts for a item that they bought 3 or 4 years ago that they desperately need repaired. And so they are finding that extremely challenging on their farms. So while they say that trade and market access for their products and workforce, getting the employees to work for them, 38%, grain freight and supply chains like the road system, are there enough trucks, are there enough places to store their grain? That was at just 28%. They're the key issues.
Okay, so there's a lot of issues there that grain growers are facing, no doubt. And while overall grower sentiment declined, positive sentiment focused on improved technology, efficiency and productivity gains, with growers showing a solid appetite for technological weed spraying, soil health innovations and new plant varieties. A preference was also demonstrated for labour-saving innovations such as autonomous machinery and improved software. So those are some of the negatives. Now, Wayne, hit us with some of the positives.
Well, I think that the growers are really saying here that we're going to have to get better varieties. We're going to have to get more technology. We're going to have to, with our sprays we use, we're going to have to get better at getting the spray to the right place. Now, I was in the southeast only this week, and I was talking about some of the innovations that they've been able to put onto, say, the output of a sprayer or onto even the air seeder when it actually puts the crop into the ground. How they can minimise the amount of fertiliser, the amount of, if you like, the chemical that goes into that ground so that they are saving money and at the same time looking at a better environmental outcome. So farmers are into that. Technology, I mean, this is a crucial thing. Farmers are positive about adding, say, GPS. I was talking to one of the farmers at Keith and I said about going around and around in the beautiful circle. He said, we don't do that anymore, Wayne. He said, we go backwards and forwards now. And in a sense, that's where it's really changed, Dan. It's got to that point where with GPS, they've got the variable rate control on each of the air seeders where a piece of land can be mapped by a computer and over a period of time they can say that that sandier area needs more or less fertiliser, more or less seed because it grows this amount when we plant canola there or when we plant, say, a barley there. So the varieties that they use, the rotations that that the scientists or agronomists are out on their farms, and they're saying to our farmers, you need to rotate in this way so that we can get a better nitrogen uptake and so on. So I think that that's some of it. Autonomous machinery was the other one in this report. And I think that's really interesting because the farmers are out there on their properties right now and they're starting to look at having, say, a air seeder or a header go around a paddock, which is autonomous. So somebody is like operating a drone and they're simply going to, on the joystick, say, well, we'll just put that header in the paddock and we'll just watch it come along and we'll get the other bloke come out and he'll get his joystick and he'll control the, if you like, the pickup of the grain, the collection of it. This is all things that are positive implementations for farmers, but some are still negative. So some are stuck in that, no, we can't change towards that, or we can't afford to change, or I don't want to get the machinery to change because the parts and the service may not be available. These are the negative concerns.
And speaking about technology on the farms, I just want to go slightly off topic for a moment here. Something we spoke about on the Country Viewpoint earlier this week and something we've been following quite closely here at Flow FM is, of course, AI in agriculture and in farming. So how does that all tie in with AI, especially with work with drones? I mean, to me, I think it should be possible to use AI software to help those drones along. So is there any insights you can give us in regards to AI in farming?
Oh, certainly, and I think that's part of it, the artificial intelligence, the software that we're talking about here to operate autonomous machinery. All of that is improving and we're getting more displays out at field days. We're about to head off to the Mallee Machinery Field Days. You and I are going to have a great time looking around at all the big tractors and so forth, but we'll be interviewing various different agents who are selling air seeders, selling their augers, and all of them are looking to implement new technology into it. And so artificial intelligence is becoming crucial, and particular workforce. We're having a smart application in horticulture, for instance, where you've got intelligence to be able to sort potatoes and carrots and onions into different categories and to different qualities. They can actually visually with their cameras be able to determine that gets bagged on this side, that gets bagged on that side, that's first grade, that's second grade, and so on. This is all going to have an impact on the farm gate price that we receive, but even artificial intelligence being used in the wool market. We were only talking yesterday in Keith about the issue of traceability. So when we export these very important farm products and we send them across to other countries, they're expecting that the wool bag that they get doesn't have a beer can or two stuck in the bottom of it from a few of the blokes who had a couple of extras after they were finished their wool classing. We are being asked to make sure that our products don't have any contamination. So artificial intelligence is going to become very important as we get that traceability right through to the end market user.
Back to the survey, which also showed that farmers are expanding their cropping, maximising their land. How do you see that working for our farmers and what will be the impacts of that?
Well, a third of growers said they want to expand. Now, that's interesting, Dan, because if you look across, say, the major farming belts in southern Western Australia, southern South Australia, through all of Victoria and then up to a good portion of southern New South Wales and then into the east coast of New South Wales, up into the central part of Queensland, where crops are grown, where a lot of bulls and cattle are kept, a lot of sheep in those areas. Across those areas, those farmers are saying, we want to expand what we crop. We want to expand how many cattle we hold. So if you go back to artificial intelligence and a range of the technology innovations and the science that's going into, say, grain growing, getting more yield per hectare or per acre, using less chemical, having less residues, all those sorts of things, all of that's being implemented by farmers. So they're hoping that if they can't get more land, because under the environmental conditions, we've got the issue, of course, of carbon and also the problems of climate that have been raised, they're saying, well, we want to expand. So 22% are planning to increase their cropping areas significantly or marginally due to more land availability or the potential for increased revenue from that. So in the grain sector, they want to, 33% want to expand, 22% will expand. That means that they're going to open up other drier land farming areas that may have been susceptible to drought and were only grazing, but because of the better way that we grow with the better scientific research into the grains, we're going to be able to open up some of that land that may have been said at the Goyder's line of South Australia that land just can't be used for cropping. Well, we may well start to see some use of cropping that's been said, no, that's grazing land. We'll go just to grazing for that land. So there will be some changes that some farmers are intending to make.
The survey also identified the 6 areas by respondents as being either extremely or moderately important. Those are farm inputs at 87%, grain, freight and supply chains at 85%, trade and market access 84%, biosecurity also at 84%, workforce at 72%, and carbon and climate lacking behind a little bit at 55%. So what can we read into these statistics?
Well, I think the farmer has a different perspective that when it comes to the issues of carbon and climate. Many are looking to embrace the challenges, but some are saying, well, I don't see a lot of difference with the rainfall I'm getting now as opposed to the rainfall that I was getting back 25 or 35, or my father and grandfather were getting back 50 and 100 years back. So in a sense, I think that carbon and climate are less issues for the actual farmer. They're more issues for the government and the scientists who are exploring them, but farmers tend to be those that want to actually maximise the benefits of what they're doing. So I think that that's why that's a much lower priority. They're more concerned about how much it costs to get diesel and how much it costs to land the chemical. They're saying, I don't know whether or not the systems for freight, the roads are good enough for grain transport. They've ripped out our rail lines, and I think that we should have better supply chains. I think our ports should be able to have bigger ships to take our grain out so that we can get better productivity for when we deliver our massive trucks there. We want to know that the port's actually able to get big lots of grain out in one hit. So they'd be asking governments to look at increasing the port sizes to get bigger ships. They'd be saying, if we're going to trade and get market access to other countries, we want to make sure that it doesn't get mucked up by politicians. And we don't want a situation where 1 minute China's taking our barley, next minute they're not, next minute the Ukraine has a war, and we're now at the whim of the pricing for that. So farmers are saying they think that's a bigger issue and so forth. So I think when we go through those top priorities, I think farmers are really saying that the carbon and climate ones are not as significant for them as what, say, the access to markets and so forth are.
All right, good issues identified there in the Grain Growers Policy Survey.
A Flow News 24 update.